All right, guys, good evening, and welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study here at VRCC. If you're online watching us or you catch this later, that's awesome. If you're in person tonight, thank you for being here and working through these questions with us. We've probably done this for almost a year now. I was looking through kind of the past ones I've had, and I have a ton of the questions that we've answered. And so what we've been doing, if you haven't been with us or you're just tuning in, we do a thing every Wednesday night. We've been doing this, and at some point, I promise, as soon as we kind of stop getting a flow of questions or text, I will kind of probably move to some other things that we'll talk about. But I've really enjoyed the questions because people can go back, or somebody may ask a question in church, and I'll say, hey, about 2 months ago, 6 months ago, we covered that. And they're like, oh, I want to go listen to that. That's kind of cool. I've always been curious about that. And so I think it's helpful, too, because many of the things we talk about, I think, really strengthen our faith. Now, the question tonight is, what does the Bible say about dinosaurs? Now, if when you were a little kid, if you were like me, you had all the dinosaur toys, and when I reached the age of maturity, probably at 12 or 13, I watched Jurassic Park, and I was like, it just changed my life. And I was like, man, I really hope somebody can do that, like, in my lifetime, because I would love to go pet a T-Rex or ride a Velociraptor or play with dinosaurs. Wouldn't that just be cool? Well, if you watched all the movies, it just did not end well, and so we should, if anybody's thinking about bringing all these things kind of back, it ends terrible in the movie. But what does the Bible say about dinosaurs? And so I think this is something that most people just either don't know, or they don't know how to respond to, or they're just not sure. So hopefully tonight, and as Stephen said before we started the stream, there is a mountain of information, videos out there, so much good stuff. I pulled from several different ministries for this information. I leaned heavily on Answers in Genesis and some of their guys who have given extensive talks and extensive background and history on this stuff. And then I pulled some stuff even from some secular places just to kind of see what other folks are saying. Now, as we get into this, we'll talk about old earth versus young earth, because that all really matters when you start to talk about this. And I think that if you're the average kid that's watching National Geographic or dinosaur shows or videos on YouTube, most of that stuff, if you ask most kids, well, like, when did the dinosaurs die? Or when did they get extinct? Or what happened? They'll be like 65 million years ago, right? That's just something that gets kind of spewed out. And so we want to make sure that we are guarding our kids, grandkids, our families at the church, that we're guarding their hearts, even in regards to dinosaurs. Because something just so subtle is like, well, they did live 250 million years ago, so what does it matter? Well, it does matter intensely, and it ultimately will matter for the gospel. Now, some people may say, well, can't you believe that dinosaurs are that old and still understand the gospel? I'm not saying you can't have a general understanding of it, but there's a lot of things that play into that, and we'll discuss some of those tonight as we walk through. So, dinosaurs certainly, the question was more than just what does the Bible say about dinosaurs? Did humans and dinosaurs live together? All of those things. So certainly, dinosaurs roam the earth. Like, we know that for a fact. We have fossils. We have bones that attest to that. They are still doing excavations all over the world, finding maybe new fossils or bones or sediment or pieces of stuff or evidence that dinosaurs were here. And so we can say that like 100%. I know there are some people that kind of go, well, I don't even think dinosaurs are real. I think they just kind of made that stuff up to just like entertain folks or built it together. None of that's true. Let's just kind of, I've even heard Christians make that argument, and I'm just going, that's just not true. It's not rooted in anything that is true, so let's pull away from that. So let me do this. I did not realize this until I just kind of started unpacking this for the last week or so, and I've spent many hours on this, like more than I would spend normally like on a Wednesday night, but I just kind of got enamored. So the first find of any dinosaur fossil or bone, at least what I could find as far as like pulling different sources together, making sure that there was a lot of consistency, was in 1677, a man by the name of Robert Plot. So he is credited with discovering the first dinosaur bone in Stones Field, which is a village outside of Oxfordshire, England. So 1677 is the first known, there could have been something before him, but the first recorded known person to ever dig up, stumble across like a dinosaur bone and not really know what he was looking at. Like not really sure of like, what did I just find? But his best guess was that it belonged to some giant human of the past. That was his thought. He just kind of saw the bone and it was a piece of the leg and thought, well, this surely can't be like any animal that I've ever seen. So it must be some giant human or something from the past. And so it wasn't till William Buckland, he was the first professor of geology at Oxford University, that the dinosaur fossil was correctly identified as a giant reptile. And so in 1815, William Buckland, this professor, he actually stumbles across the exact same dinosaur bone that Robert Plott did in the exact same area and just was like, what in the world? And he's a geologist, so he's looking at it and he's going, man, this is not just something, it's not a human. This is something that's from their past. And so he realized that this was a giant reptile, this giant lizard. And so he coined the name in 1824. They dug the rest of it up, and he named the ancient lizard, which was the first name of any dinosaur, the Megalosaurus. That was just what he was like, this is what we're going to call this giant lizard. And then, so since then, we've just been discovering dinosaurs, fossils, since the 1820s. And then there was a man around the 1820s named Gideon Mantle. He was a doctor as well. He was a geologist, and he found some teeth in Sussex, England, in a quarry that he and his wife were walking around in, and he discovered that this was an entirely new species of reptile. So you kind of have William Buckland in 1815, then to the 1820s in England, but a different location. Gideon Mantle finds some stuff and goes, oh man, this looks like a giant lizard. And so what he was looking at was he was seeing that when he the bone structure, he says, it kind of looks like a massive iguana. That was his thought, like just the layout once they got a stand back look. And he says, so we're going to call this the iguanodon. So that was kind of the name that he came up with. And so over the past 200 years, we have accumulated nearly 11,000 dinosaur fossils. So we've accumulated a pretty good bit off of like all the continents. I mean, just all. I don't know about Antarctica, but all the other ones that we have accumulated fossils from. And so the Bible, in answer to does the Bible speak about dinosaurs, the Bible does not use the word dinosaur, which I think is important to note. The word dinosaur, that word was coined by a man in 1841. So after all of this stuff had happened, that starts to become more popular, because as soon as you find dinosaur bones, and you're like, hey, this is a giant reptile, people come flocking to this place to set up places so that they can excavate and draw this stuff out, find teeth, find bones, and start putting pieces together, which I watched a couple videos on the process of that. That is you may spend your entire career like working on one little area to draw out all of the stuff that's there, and the tediousness that it takes to chip away rock and then determine what looks like a fossil but it's not really a fossil. And there's been thousands of false finds, like, oh, we think we found something, well then they didn't find anything. And so that's important to note too, that it's not like we're just walking around and there's just dinosaur bones kind of just everywhere that we walk if we just are digging in the garden. So 1841, Sir Richard Owen, who was an English biologist, in 1841, he coined the phrase after they had some more of these pictures of these beasts and some drawings of them. He coined the word dinosaur from dinos, these two Greek words, dinos, which means terrible, and saurus, which means lizard. So some people think, man, like they just may have used that language years ago. It wasn't until 1841 that we even have the word dinosaur that even comes up. So not even until 1841 is that word even a word in the English language, which will be important when we get kind of down to discussing what words in the Bible that the Scriptures use. And so one of the questions, too, I think that kind of is drawn out is, well, how big were the dinosaurs, right? We've all seen movies. We've seen shows on it. There's all kind of stuff out there to be seen. Some of it's not profitable, not beneficial. But kind of to the best of our ability, there were dinosaurs that were 80 tons. 80 tons. I don't know how much that is in pounds, but a lot of pounds. 80 tons, some 40 feet or more tall, and some as long as 137 feet. Like, that's just a massive, that's just a massive animal. How much? 160,000 pounds. That's not even a fathomable weight that I can even comprehend. So when did they live? Now, when we discuss when did dinosaurs live, the evolutionist will say 245 million to 65 million years ago. Now, when you say that, like, I'm not even like in this field. Like, I am no expert on the topic. I'm just gathering, researching, looking at the text, studying stuff that people have put out that are credible. If somebody told you, like, I think it happened either 1,000 years ago or like 200,000 years ago, like, that's kind of the super broad spectrum. It was like 65 million to maybe 245 million years ago. And I'm sitting there looking at this going, how is that even like a category of like ranges? Like, that just seems like a terrible, like just like a huge guesstimation. This could have been a couple million or 200 or 300 million years ago. Well, how old is the earth? Well, I don't know, like a couple billion, maybe 4.5 billion years old. Like, what do we even gauge in to even get any type of understanding of that? Now, when you take a timeline, and this may be another one that we do in a couple of weeks, we may do this where we talk about how old do we believe that the earth is? Like, since Adam, how old do we believe the earth is? Now, I am a young earth, like, creationist. So I believe the earth is, give or take, since the time of Adam, 6,000 years old. Now, some of that ranges 6 to 8, depending on, like, who you're talking to and what genealogies you're looking at. But, like, probably no more than 8,000 years old the earth is. Now, that just seems, some people, like, when I say that, they go, that's crazy. Well, it's crazy because what? You've been indoctrinated by the system. That's why it sounds crazy, because no science show, unless you are buying something from a Christian creationist standpoint, is saying, hey, man, the earth is 100% 6,000 years old, right? Especially if people think that the scriptures aren't true and all of those stories are made up and are not historically accurate. Of course they would say what? Well, the Bible's no authority for me. Of course the earth is millions and millions and millions of years old, which means when they say this, they're saying that humans didn't come about till way, 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 way later than the dinosaurs. Which means what? That dinosaurs were dying and there was death before the first man, which is a huge problem for the believer in Christ. This is why it's important to teach our kids this. I had like a really cool video, and Kate watched it. She was like, y'all talking about dinosaurs tonight? So I let her watch this video from Answers in Genesis, and she just watched it like the whole way up here. And she was just like, man, Dad, you know, even the stuff that we read, and it's not even like it's not even that, like, I think people are even aware that they're being exposed to stuff that literally is contradictory to the scriptures and the gospel, because we know this, that death did not start taking place until what? Genesis 3, when man fell. That is huge. So there can't be death before Adam, or that would mean what? Sin was already in the world and the scriptures are not true. So we have a huge problem with that just from the gospel standpoint. So I just want us to be aware of that. So the Bible, I believe, is 6,000 years old. So when did dinosaurs come about? So what day did God make the animals that would be on the land? You know what day? It's 1 out of 6. You got to, I don't know what percentage that is, but you got to. What day did God create the beast of the earth? 4, 6. You guys are so close. So, and also to this, some of us kind of miss that because we go, well, he made man on the 6th day. Well, he did make man on the 6th day, but he also made livestock and beasts of the earth on the 6th day as well. So Genesis 1:24 says this, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So he makes them. Then he says this, Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female. He created them, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth. Everything that has the breath of life I have given every green plant for food. And it was so, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So if you get a Bible trivia question or something, you're like, oh yes, animals of the land, creeping things made on the same day that he made humans, male and female. So one of the questions too is, I remember talking to this lady one time. We were having this conversation, and I don't know what came up, and she was like, something about dinosaurs, and like I just always kind of just been like, yeah, I mean, dinosaurs, like, I guess they were just here when humans were, and like the interaction was just, I guess, semi-cordial, in the garden, right? Like we just think about Jurassic Park and crazy stuff, and it's like there's all this aggression, but think about this prior to the fall in the garden, like there's no animosity, there's no killing, there's no death. And so somebody was like, well, what did they eat in the garden, right? Like T-Rex, sharp teeth, all these things. What did they eat? Well, Genesis 1:29 through 30, the scriptures tell us. It says, and God said, behold, which I'm going to just read a portion of the last thing we read, I have given you every plant yielding seeds that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. But prior to the fall, everybody's a what? Vegetarian, right? Now, I don't think that is like an argument to go, well, that's why everybody just needs to be a vegan. Like, I have to have my chicken nuggets, that is, it's not an argument to go, well, nobody gets to eat meat, like we need to go back. And there are some people that go, everybody needs to go back to kind of a Garden of the Eden type diet. Like I get, if you're eating plant protein stuff, knock it out, that's great. But like, it's not a sin or wrong to eat meat, right? Like the fall happened and that got introduced. But notice this, why is everybody a vegetarian and nobody's a carnivore? Because in order to be a carnivore, what would have to happen? Somebody would have to die. Like you would be killing animals. And so God goes, I've given all of this stuff for you to eat. The plants, the fruit, like it's all yours. Like eat this. So the dinosaurs, so lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, everything is just eating like fruit. And what's even crazy about that is I watched a few videos, y'all. Crocodiles apparently love fruit. And they love plants. You can look it up online. I saw it the other day. Like you don't understand the trail I went down when I went into this stuff. Like just because I had never really explored it. So like there are a ton of carnivores now that will eat fruit and sustain on fruit. So when somebody says, there's just no way that could have happened, it's like, well, absolutely that could have happened because it's clear in the scriptures. And even after the fall, now in 2024, we have evidence of these carnivorous animals that love fruit and also can sustain and not have to necessarily eat meat, though they do eat meat because obviously the world's fallen, and if a cheetah sees a gazelle, he's like, lunch. Like that's just what they're doing, right? It's the same thing when we hunt and kill animals for food. So the Bible plainly teaches from Genesis to Revelation, and this is another thing, if you get nothing else out of this tonight, just understand this. The Bible plainly teaches from Genesis to Revelation that there was no death of animals or humans. Nothing died before Adam sinned. If that's true, and dinosaurs existed with humans, which we believe that they did, if that's true, then it wipes out the evolutionary scale altogether. Like he just puts it to death. And I'm even going to read a couple of scholars that are like, if that's true, the biblical account makes perfect sense. So really when somebody says, well, who cares if dinosaurs are 65 million years old? It matters from a gospel perspective if they're 65 million years old because there was no humans. Even the evolutionists believes there was no humans back then anyways. So that becomes a problem. And so if Christians go, well, I just believe that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't even matter. A day to the Lord's 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. It could have just been, or people talk about the gap theory between in the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth, and they're like, oh, well, after that, there's just massive millions and billions of years of gap where all this other stuff happened, and then we just kind of like stumbled in like later, which is just not true. I don't think that's true at all. The Hebrew word for day in Genesis 1, the first section, is very clear. Like that is a 24-hour period, and it took God 7 days to create, or 6 days, and then he rested on the 7th, which is where we get our calendar from. Like very clear. There's just so much evidence to push back against the gap theory and some of the other things that are out there. But I digress because we're not talking about that. But meaning that there could be no fossil. So when somebody says, look at this T-Rex femur, like, look at this bone. It is 215 million years old. And we're looking at that going, there couldn't be death before Adam's sin. Therefore, that bone is not that old. That fossil is not that old. So the fall of man in Genesis 3 is where we have to look. So I also want to say this. In Romans 8:20, this is very, very important to note. Romans 8:20. So not only we see in Romans 5 that death came through, sin comes through one man, Adam, and then death spread to all men because all sinned. So now death reigns on this earth because Adam sinned and rebelled against God. Also, not only did Adam fall, and now we're infected, and now we're broken, and we're sinners in need of a Savior. Romans 8:20 says this, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. So not only are we broken, the world is broken. People die of snake bites every day. People have died of a piece of a meteor coming through the atmosphere. Like we die because we live in a world that is absolutely like tainted with sin. And so not only is that, people get run over by animals, killed by a horse. There's this crazy guy online. You can see him. He's getting like bucked by he's at the Yosemite. And he's out there like slapping oxen on the rear. And they're just like gouging him. And I'm like, dude, here's the dumb prize, bag that you won for that. So we live in a fallen world. So if it's like, should we go play with a tiger? It's like, no, shouldn't. Probably shouldn't do that. So we live in a world that is broken. And because of that, chaos reigns on and in and through everything. So Romans 8:20 is a good place to go to say, not only are we groaning for the return of Christ, for the redemption, for glorification of our new bodies in the new heavens and new earth, but the creation, like God's not just doing away with creation, He will restore it. We will go back to the Garden of Eden with no tempter in the garden because He will be thrown into the lake of fire and we will not have to worry about that anymore. So that's a beautiful thing. So we hope in that. We rejoice in that. So what about fossils? Like why do we find fossils? So like some of these fossils are under like sediment. And Stephen's read a lot on this stuff. I probably could explain it afterwards even better than I could. But like when we look at sediment layers, most archaeologists, geologists now, if they're honest, they will say like, look, there's one guy, and I think he's from the UK. He's an atheist, a self-proclaimed atheist. But he even said in a book that he wrote, he said, here's the reality. You can have things fossilize over just like 20 years. Or it could be, in his words, 200 million. And it's like, well, what have you witnessed? And he has pictures on his site of things that have fossilized over the last 100 years. And it's incredibly similar to the stuff that they're saying is 200 million years old. So it's not even a good depiction. Look, y'all, if you look up stuff on carbon dating and what's the other way that we do the measurements? Carbon dating and... Yes, the amount of uranium that's in an object or in an item that they find. All of that, y'all, is really just subjective and is really, really new as far as experimentation with it. So they're just kind of going, Well, we'll just say it's 300 million years old. Well, if they say that, then they can reject, like the gospel can be rejected if they say that, and so can the scriptures. And I believe, to be honest with you, just my honest opinion on it, it is just another facet that Satan has dressed up with a bow and packaged very pretty. Listen, all you need is a really good illustrator with some really cool pictures of dinosaurs and a couple of guys with a couple of letters after their name saying they've been trained in this and trained in that to come on TV and go, listen, all of that's false. This is what's true. All it takes is that. And everybody just kind of claps and goes home and thinks nothing else about it. And meanwhile, those seeds have been planted in our kids' heads. And so it's like, no. Parents need to know about dinosaurs. That's why we've even had some books out there talking about the Answers in Genesis books, like refuting those things, talking about when dinosaurs were here. So those resources are for your benefit to help edify your kids, because obviously, like most sermon series are not like, hey, we're doing 7 weeks on dinosaurs, in the summer. But maybe that needs to be some of the stuff that we do. But it's also helpful that we talk about this from a gospel perspective. So why do we find fossils? The number one reason that we find fossils, and people have talked all types of ways around this, but we can go back to Genesis 6, 7, and 8 and look at what? The flood. We can look at the flood. Genesis 6, 11 through 13. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence, and God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Notice this, all flesh. All flesh. Like all living things. It's just a free-for-all. Like, I mean, not that I'd want to be present for that, but it was like, man, if you could just have like a drone shot cam for like a couple of days of the corruption on the earth, so much so that God goes, I'm about to just end this whole thing. I'm just about to end this whole thing. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. But God is also faithful to His promise that He made in Genesis 3 to Adam and Eve. And so He will preserve a family. And I love this, when we read the ark story, it says that they went into the ark and what? God sealed them in. The great protector to bring us through this storm. He provides. Now, part of this was that He would bring in like 2 of every kind and sets of 7 on some. A few of the animals, but 2 pairs, male and female, to come into the ark. Now, in Genesis 6, 19 through 20, He gives this command to Noah. He says, and of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kind, and of the animals according to their kinds. Of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind, 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Now, this is kind of a question, I guess, that people bring up and go, okay, well, how in the world are you going to get some 80-ton, 40-foot tall, 137-foot long pair of dinosaurs like into the ark? Well, clearly we wouldn't be putting, the middle-aged father in his 40s like into the ark. Like we would be what? What would we be putting into the ark? Like young, juvenile dinosaurs, male and female, that can procreate after the flood subsides. Like that's who we're putting in the thing. It's not like, well, we're just going to get the biggest things that we can get and just bring them in here. So when we find all these fossils, it's very funny. I'm going to make this kind of motion. It's going to look silly, but if you will look at pictures of fossils that we dig up, all the shots of them, like when they find them, like when they find some intact, like you will see like the dinosaur is like, they're arched almost like that. That's actually like, I know that's kind of funny, like the motion, but there's a name for it, and I read the name before I came in here, and I cannot say it, but it's almost like a death pose that happens when animals are drowned in water. Like their bones make a certain like angling because they're trying to breathe underwater and they're not built to breathe underwater. And so it's just so consistent when you see that. Even animals that we found now that have died and their bones are in the water, like in sediment, it's like, look at that pose. It's the exact same thing that we find of beasts when we dig up stuff from the flood. It's the same pose. And I just thought, well, that's cool. And if you don't think about it, like you can just be like, oh, well, National Geographic, a super helpful spiritual channel, that just like tell us like, well, this is how it happened. So it's important that we know that. Now, I will say this. Y'all, when I was little, I was like, there must be 50 million types of dinosaurs, right? I was just like, there's just got to be so many types. Well, like many of the fossils we found, y'all, are just like pieces. So like we went to, I think it's the Smithsonian, is it DC? DC went to the Smithsonian. This has been a couple years ago. And we go to the Smithsonian, and I walk in, and they have a massive T-Rex, and they have a Stegosaurus maybe, and a Triceratops, like all of like the heavy hitters of like childhood cartoons and stuff. And like I'm like, man, I'm walking around like they found every single piece of it. Like this guy's perfect. Well, we get to talking to the guy, and I said, y'all dug up every look how big this thing is. He's like, oh no. Rarely do we find one fully intact. So what they do is they get a piece and they can computer generate what they believe it would look like, and then they produce like the bones. They make them to fit and sort. Now some we have full stuff of. But most scholars would say that most dinosaurs were as big as, could be as small as a chicken, but as big as a sheep, a bison, maybe a large horse. Like most of them were not just, I mean, movies and stuff kind of extrapolate that and everything is just massive constantly. But they said a lot of them, when we put together the bones, because the flesh, when we see a picture of a dinosaur, that's just somebody recreating what they believe it would have looked like. It's not 100% known what all they would have looked like. Not to mention, we were at the zoo the other day talking about, well, are they just all attacking people and killing folks? But like pandas have extremely sharp, aggressive teeth. And like they just chill and eat bamboo all day. So like when somebody says, well, if they got canines like that, they have to be carnivores, not necessarily at all. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And so it's almost like we've just been told things because of and I'm just going to say this, my kids in the public school system, because of that, we've just been taught things because they've just been given things to teach, and so this is what we teach. So it's important that you and I, grandparents, parents, anybody in here, kids in the public school system, that you become the biblical filter for what your kids are learning, right? That's it. I mean, every time Kate comes home, what'd you learn in science? What'd you read? Let's talk about it. And she is very quick to go, well, Dad, like the Bible says this, or like God wouldn't do whatever. And we just kind of discuss it. Nothing's really hammered. Now, I know as we get older, there may be more like complex issues and stuff too, but like she is always going to have the world telling her something different than what the scriptures are. And so we just want to be there to kind of walk her through those things so that we can be helpful within that. So, but some geologists and archaeologists will say, there are only about 50 types of dinosaurs. Only about 50 types. Like, and that's kind of a whatever guess. But like some of the dinosaurs, they says we've gotten bones, but that's all we've gotten. So out of that bone, we've kind of constructed a whole new species or line of dinosaur, which may or may not be totally true. It may not be all that. So take those things with a grain of salt. I did not realize that the stuff we see in museums, a lot of that is not fully stuff that they just found, cleaned up, and then just put together. Like it has been constructed because they didn't have all the pieces. And so some of it was guesswork when they did it. So are they on the ark? Yes, they're on the ark, but they're probably smaller when they go on the ark. We're not just being like, well, just go get Papaw Dinosaur, at full girth and just put him in, like that's not the case, or it wouldn't make any sense. But the ark, if you've ever been to the Ark Encounter, I know Stephen and Chelsea have been up there. We're going to plan, Stephanie and I are going to plan when Parker's just a little bit older to take her up there. And I saw this on their site. 483 tractor-trailer trucks can fit or could have fit on the ark. Yes. Stephen said it's a lot of walking. 483 tractor-trailers. So if you were like, was it kind of cramped? Was there space? No, there was plenty of space to put them on there. And so a young earth stance, where I would stand, most of you I believe would be right there with me. The young earth stance calculates the flood would have been roughly 4,500 years ago from right now. 4,500 years ago from right now. Which the flood would account for the fossil layers that we find and where we've dug and excavated, where many of the dinosaur bones are from. So very, very cool. I just think that that's really neat, really helpful, especially if somebody wants to kind of press back against it. You can say, well, actually, let's look at the Scriptures. Now, there again, if somebody goes, I don't believe the Scriptures, I'm not listening to that, then we just pray that the Lord would work on their heart and tend and till that soul. So, dinosaurs in the Bible. Now, we don't have a ton of just explicit text to this. Now, one reason that might be is this. If dinosaurs are just existing with humans, and most of them are eating plants anyways, would it be a massive, if you were writing a letter, you wouldn't be like, man, you will not believe the dog next door. Like, my neighbor's got a wicked, crazy cat. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if somebody was like, I saw an elephant in Villa-Rica, we'd be like, what? Where? Like, we would go to that. If you're in India, nobody's like, you would not believe this is an elephant. He just came out of the woods. Because what? It's normal. Like, it's just you see it all the time. So if you see that stuff all the time, it would just be normal. You wouldn't be like, I need to reference it every time I see it. You know, you wouldn't do that. So in the Bible, we have a couple of accounts in Job 40 and Job 41 with two beasts that we see, the behemoth and the Leviathan. Those are two distinct, like, creatures that are mentioned in the Scriptures. And so as God is kind of explaining all of the things that He has created, all of His works and His wonders to Job, because Job is like, you know, well, God, I'm trying to kind of figure this out. And God goes, did you hang the sun? Did you hang the moon? Did you tell the ocean where to stop? Did you place the stars and name them where they're supposed to go? And so this is what we read in Job 40, 15 says this, behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. Cedar tree's huge. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. For his shade, the lotus tree cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Job 40, 15 through 24. Like, in other words, this creature is not to be played with. The river is turbulent and he just walks across it like it's a puddle, like it's not a big deal. This kind of sounds like a Bronchiosaurus or a long-necked dinosaur. Like, this sounds exactly like something that would be. And then in Job 41, we read about the Leviathan. Job 41, I'm going to flip to it right quick. I'm just going to read just a few excerpts from this. Job 41, I'll start in verse 1. And then he says this to Job. God says, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? He will make many pleas to you. Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? Or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fish spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. So he's talking about this reptilian lizard or whatever that's in the water, and he's going, nothing hurts this thing. You cannot come after him. If you put your hands on him, it will not happen again. Behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. I will not keep silence concerning his limbs or his mighty strength or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another, no air can come between them. They are joined one another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. And then verse 18 is crazy. I'm going to read 18 right quick. 18 through just 21, then we'll stop. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils smoke comes forth as from boiling pots and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. Y'all, that sound like if you're just reading that sounds an awful lot like what? What? Yeah. Like, is this dude spitting fire? Like, think about that. So when we get this illustration and we read this, we go, there's this behemoth that's this land. He's just identifying two. You've got a Leviathan, which sounds like, have you ever seen like the super mega crocs? Like some of the stuff, it's like, is this what this is? And like he has some type of chemical reaction where he can like spit fire. Like, yeah, you're staying away from the pond. It's like, no, you can't go get water by yourself. We're taking 100 guys down there to get water. Like, he's saying this is like, God goes, I've made this, and you're talking about challenging me. You can't even challenge something I made. And so when we read this, it is kind of overwhelming. And so people say, you really think that there's some animal out there, or there's been an animal in the past that could blow fire like a dragon? I'm going, well, why is that so implausible or so crazy? Like within the creation story, can God not do that? So the question, were there dinosaurs? Were there things that we would maybe call a dragon? Like that would be the reference? Because like I said, dinosaur is something that came later, 1800s. That's not even something that was around there. It kind of seems to me that there could be something like that. Now, I just kind of did some research. I was like, is there any animal that can blow some fire, flames, something? I'm looking this up, right? Like I understand like things go extinct and things die out, and I get that. And so I found this little guy. I didn't find him. I just looked him up online. The Bombardier beetle. Look this guy up. You see a video of this. This little beetle can create chemicals in his body, and he can shoot out of his backside like these little like chemicals that are 100 degrees Celsius and just smoke his enemies out of his, I don't know if it's his rear, his bottom, but they have clocked it at 22. I'm not making this up. This is a real thing. This is something the Lord made. Look this up. Look the beetle up. I speak no lie is up here. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's on YouTube. So, 22 miles an hour, 100 degrees Celsius. It'll burn your hand. So, to say, could there not have been something that created some type of chemical reaction to blow some flame out or smog or whatever he's producing? Could that have happened? Like, absolutely, we believe that could happen. And so scholars have attempted to kind of go, well, the behemoth and the Leviathan, what we think that he's talking about there. And y'all, even like my ESV study Bible, like goes, we believe it's like a hippopotamus and like an elephant. And I'm going, I have never seen no hippo with a tail like the cedar tree. And I think some of that is just a way that we can kind of not explain away, but just go, well, it's just kind of poetry. It's not really literal right here. God's not really speaking in a way that he's saying this is something that I've actually done. It's more poetic. Well, if it's poetic, he spends 40 verses explaining something that could have just been like, I've created the great beast that you can't handle. Why the detail of every body part and talking about him blowing fire? Like, that just makes no sense that it would just kind of go on and on and on like that. So in the Hebrew, we have a word called tanin, T-A-N-N-I-N. It's used about 30 times in the Old Testament, and I'm going to give you one example here in Isaiah 27, verse 1. It says, in that day the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, which the word serpent there is the word tanin. Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. Tanin. Now, depending on your translation that you have, and this is used about 30 times, the NASB uses the word sea monster. That's the word that they translate. The New King James Version uses the word serpent, but the King James Version uses the word dragon. So you kind of see that like that word was not just like some regular, like this ain't like a pet iguana or like a bearded lizard. Like this was like well beyond anything like that. And I thought about this throughout history, so I was like, well, let me just look throughout history, because dragons are like in every culture. I mean, every culture, right? We have movies or shows about it. There's always some picture of some dragon. It's like, I don't think people just came up with that and was like, you know what, let's just create some creature that blows fire and flies around. Like, I don't think that, now maybe it's been obviously extrapolated throughout movies and cinema and stuff like that, but when we look in history, things in the World Encyclopedia, I want you to hear this. In 1973, now they have since removed it from the World Encyclopedia, but listen to this section. The dragons of, this was on dragons in the World Encyclopedia. The dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles, dinosaurs, which inhabited the earth long before man is supposed to have appeared on the earth. And then it goes on to note that so many cultures describe these things throughout their history that there might be some little bit of truth to the fact that some people witnessed and maybe actually saw these giant reptiles, like in person. Like, why is that? Because we have history of this. Carl Sagan, he's an atheist. He wrote a book called The Dragons of Eden, and he points this out in the book. He said that the dragon myths aren't just found in the Western world, but are instead in a worldwide phenomenon. There needs to be some explanation for the reason that they are in all these cultures. Like, something has to be up. Like, can somebody in Asia be thinking something as somebody in the UK? Like, how can there be elements of that, drawings, hieroglyphics, stuff that is chiseled? How can there be all that in different continents, at different times, and different places throughout history? It just wouldn't make sense unless what? Somebody had seen and kind of passed down what they'd seen. And so I looked at this too, the Chinese zodiac, which, I mean, I know that's just, it's irrelevant or whatever, but the Chinese zodiac, if you look up the zodiac, Chinese zodiac, there's 12 animals on the Chinese zodiac. The first, or the 11 of them, rat, monkey, tiger, bird, like things that you and I would go, I mean, you saw it, you would identify it immediately in a picture. Well, one of the other ones is a dragon. So it's like we just put 11 animals that we all know and then just put one fictitious thing just randomly on the thing. That makes no sense. In the there's a Mesopotamian cylinder seal that has dinosaurs in their carvings. Like in their carvings. And I actually got, I don't know if everybody can see this, I printed these out. This is in, this one is actually in Cambodia. Let me find the Mesopotamian one. No, this one's in Cambodia, right here. This is 13th century and 12th century, so 1101 AD through 1300 AD. Some of you may not be able to see that, but that is what is carved in the temples in the jungle. Looks a lot like, what is that dinosaur with the plates on its back? A Stegosaurus. So I'll pass some of those out if you guys just want to like take a look at them, and then I have the location at the bottom. So we have these pictures throughout history of dinosaurs like chiseled and carved into like structures from early on. And like nobody, y'all, listen, at this point, nobody's dug any bones up. So the only way that you're going to actually, I mean, there's no way to just be like, I thought of that in my head, and then we've created what we think is from the bones that we found now going, that's a Stegosaurus. Well, 1,000 years ago, they're sitting there chiseling that out in some jungle in Cambodia. It's kind of mind-blowing. There are carvings that are 1,000 years old in tombs that have dinosaurs that are locking their necks. Just like giraffes would lock necks, that these dinosaurs would do this. There is a pallet it's like a little plate it's called the Namir pallet. It was found in Egypt, and it is a 5,000-year-old picture. And I think that blows my mind. And I'll let you look at some of these other ones when we get through. But Cambodian temples, 1,000 years ago, these carvings are there. And so there was a geologist named was Louis Jacobs. He said this. He said this because he has seen. You just hold it. He has seen these pictures, and he says this. He thinks that that's just stuff that they fabricated, like somebody just kind of created some creature mythological. They just kind of made it up and did it. But he says this. He said, if all this stuff is true, right? If all this stuff is true, that men and women walked with these creatures and that they began when man came into being, he says, such an association would dispel an earth with vast antiquity. So such a discovery, if this is true, it would dispel an earth that is super, super old. Like it just wouldn't make any sense. Because all of their stuff is hinging on these fossils and stuff that they're saying they're dating 200 million years ago. He says, the entire history of creation, including the day of rest, referencing the scriptures, could be accommodated in the 7 biblical days of and here's his phrasing, the Genesis myth. So he's referencing it as false, but he's saying, if it's true that dinosaurs were here, then all of our dating is wrong. Like we've just missed the mark on it. Evolution would be vanquished. So he's even admitting, if all this stuff's true, like this doesn't look good for the scientist. Well, what's cool is this. There was a scientist named Mary Schweitzer, and on March 25th, 2005, her team was looking at samples and fossils from a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this is crazy. When you get home, you can look this up. Look up T-Rex soft tissue. So they discovered like red, like blood veins and soft tissue under a microscope from some of the fossils that they dug up. And the scientists were like, there's no way it could be 250 million years old. It would never last, which means it's not 250 million years old at all. So here's the question. Here's the big question everybody kind of asks. Why or where did they go extinct, right? Like, that's the big question. How come we don't have, how come we're not at the park and, hey, man, see if you guys can catch that stegosaurus, running across to the, slides. Yeah. So there's all of these theories that have come about from the evolutionists. One of the crazy theories, and I think they just come up with this stuff because they don't have any they're just guessing, is that the plants, climate change happened millions of years ago. The plants started to give off a weird gas. The dinosaurs ate them and basically had terrible gas and indigestion, and it just killed them. If gas and indigestion is the issue, man, I'm done. I've had acid reflux for years. That makes no sense. That's just grasping at straws. That's crazier than the beetle shooting flames or whatever out of his rear, burning his enemies. But, so they will say a meteorite struck the earth, right? A massive meteor struck, there's videos on that, just struck the earth, made it inhabitable for 100 million years, and then it all kind of died down, and then evolution started to take place, and then people just kind of came about from single-cell organisms. I believe, when you tell me that, I've had people tell me that, I'm going, you got more faith than I do. You have to, there's no way, you got way more faith than I do. Your stuff is so ridiculous, and it's so far-fetched, and most of that I just think is this. You were at war against the God who made you. You so badly do not want this to be true that you would create in your head some crazy, if somebody goes, it was 250 million years ago, it's how can we prove that? It's hard to go, 20 years ago this happened. If somebody told you some story 20 years ago this happened, or 30 years ago before you had cell phones filming everything, it would be how do we even prove that? And then you just want to make a thing and say, well, 100 million years ago it went down. Okay. Who can testify or verify to any of that? Well, nobody can. Volcanoes erupted. All kind of crazy theories and stuff came about. But I believe this, that most of the dinosaurs, I say most, many of the fossils we're finding under the deep sediment is from the flood. Now, obviously, because Job takes place after the flood, and we have the Leviathan, and we have the Behemoth, that there were dinosaurs on the ark, and obviously creatures in the deep, in the seas, that survived that. But over time, like you have habitat change, you have genetic changes, you have other species evolving, you have species that are dying out, which if you could look online, like just species that have become extinct or dead, like y'all, it wasn't even too terribly long ago I was reading this, they didn't even think the dodo bird existed. Like they didn't even think it was a thing. And then all of a sudden, like some little museum in some country was like, yeah, we have one. And they ended up finding the species. Like they didn't even believe it was existent. And also every year, this is crazy, every year we discover new species of animals. Like I think we just think, oh, we just got everything figured out. Y'all, there are tribes right now, this is crazy, and I'm not saying it's true or not. There are tribes right now that have drawn pictures of massive reptiles in the Amazon and the Congo. And they're like, you guys ought to see this stuff. We can't even get people in there. It's so crazy. So we have not explored. The ocean is literally unexplored comparatively. Like we've explored just like a pinch of it. Who knows what may exist? Now, obviously, as people build, habitats go out, where would any animal like that operate and live if we're just building stuff and expanding? Like it's not going to be walking through the streets. It would be not away. It would be gone, which is animals have just kind of like left and vacated. But I think the reason why we don't have all those, or the extinction of dinosaurs specifically, obviously, y'all, like I think hunting probably had something to do with that. As civilization started to build, like if you were like, hey, that's a giant reptile, I don't want my kids to be eaten or attacked by that, what would you do? You would take the men, I get the real men, you would take your hunters, and you would go out and you would just kill that thing, right? That's a lot of meat. We can use the bone for stuff. I mean, like I think that's what happens. So over time, hunting, habitat change, and also too, there's a ton of evidence, and I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of the atmospheric changes after the flood happened. The environment was just much harsher, and so depending on like where you were at and where the dinosaurs were, so it wouldn't be crazy. And somebody was like, well, the Bible's just not always talking about dinosaurs or bringing up dragons. Well, if people just lived amongst these things, like if you live in Africa, it's not like, you don't just be like, I just tweeted, I just saw a lion. It was roared at me. Like it would just be like, yeah, like they live here. Like if you live amongst these things, that would be a normal. You wouldn't just write about them if it's normal. Genetic changes and then climate change and stuff as well. Because obviously, I mean, that is we've had climate change in the world over thousands of years. So now, to kind of tie it all up and put a bow on it, and so we can leave. Like I said earlier, the ultimate issue is a gospel issue. It is a gospel issue. Death came into the world when man sinned in the garden. If dinosaurs are 65 million years or 250 million years old, then there was death before man sinned, which makes the scriptures untrue, which makes the Bible not true, which makes God a liar, which ultimately changes how we understand things from a biblical perspective, which kind of just puts Romans like to bed, and it can't be trusted. So a biblical timeline, we have said, would put the earth at 6,000 years old, roughly, give or take. And so I believe that is the most straightforward, biblical way to read it. Once we trace all the genealogies, that puts the earth at that age. And y'all, that may sound new to some people, like in the world, but like it really comes down to this. Do we trust the authority and truthfulness of the Word of God? And so in your homes, and in my home, and in our family, church families' homes, we will either press against what the culture has told us and what the world has given us that is slowly kind of seeped into like churches and ministries, and people don't know what they believe. Like, there are people, Answers in Genesis is just a really great ministry to buy their stuff and support them and, like gather their resources, because they are one of the few places in the world that are pressing against this, like, intentionally and, like, radically. And so you guys understand that, like, a kid growing up right now, like, you understand, like, a little kid right now in a secular home thinks nothing about a boy saying he's a girl or a girl saying that he's a boy. It's just not a big deal. Why? Because it's normal. It's become normal language. It is completely normal for somebody to say, oh, yeah, I had an abortion. Like, it's not a life. Why would you say that? Because what we start doing, we dress stuff up. We take sin, which is filthy, and we put a bow on it, and we change the language and change the lingo and change the tone and say it softly and have a pamphlet and give it out to people. And all of a sudden, something that is treacherous and murder and catastrophic becomes what? Oh, I could swallow that. I mean, it's easier to digest for people when it's delivered. Like, it's the delivery. It's the delivery. It's the serpent in the garden, right? Did God really say that if you eat this, you'll die? Did he really say that? It's just planting a seed of doubt. So when somebody says, I don't think dinosaurs are a big deal, well, it is a big deal because the scriptures are a big deal. So hopefully this helps equip and maybe even sparks your desire to go read more and look stuff up. And it's so important, because if somebody said, well, where's the dinosaur in the Bible? Where is that in the scriptures? You can just be like, well, Job 40 and Job 41. Like, let me just take you and you read it for yourself. That may blow somebody's mind. I was a Christian 5 or 6 years before I ever even knew this text existed. Like, I just never heard it. Like, nobody ever said it to me. And then somebody mentioned it. I was like, oh, my gosh, that's crazy. Now, it's not like every day someone's like, I want to challenge you on dinosaurs. So it's not like I'm just fighting that fight all the time. But I know that within school with Kate, within different things, within culture, it will come up. And so we need to be equipped, ready to fight and wrestle and coerce dialogue with people so that we can explain to them the truth of the scriptures, which I think is like the most important thing. So, guys, thanks for tonight. I appreciate your time and patience. You guys online, thank you for hanging out with us. Or if you watch this later, that's awesome. And know that we love you. We have service at 10 a.m. This Sunday, and we will be in our second section in Matthew 6 on prayer. And so hopefully we'll see you there. And know that we love you, know that Jesus loves you, and